Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game of me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, we haven't got time for our usual small talk before the show, you know, the stuff that really annoys our listeners and BAFTA. As you've got a meeting to get to, we've got quite a lot of news stories to do. So we have to crack on, which might be the shape of things to come, Kieran. Who knows? We won't be mentioning Oxford because that got us into trouble last time, because there's different stories about the timeline of the Oxford United story. So we may revisit that depending on how many more angry tweets we get from two people in particular.
I've been contacted by the chief executive of Oxford who wants a chat.
Oh dear, that doesn't sound good, does it?
That is a naughty step, isn't it?
Actually, do you know what? Any other club, if you said the chief executive of Mansfield, you think, oh my God, the chief executive of Oxford probably wants to recommend a nice little coffee bar somewhere, I imagine. A few working class Oxford supporters going, it's quite rough out here, you know, which is true. It is. We've all been to the old manor ground. It's a bit like the Wild West, the old place. Anyway, already, Kieran, we've said no small talk, and we've straight into small talk. Our first story, Kieran, it's Newsday. I'm not entirely sure whether this story about 777 is good news or bad news for Everton fans, considering what we know about the way 777 have worked in the past.
Yes, it's good in the sense that Everton need cash, and they need cash urgently. Now, as far as the sources of that cash are concerned, we've got the owner, Farhad Moshiri, who appears to have done a disappearing act and is not being seen. He has been very generous, or rather his bank account has been very generous. Where his money gets into his bank account is another matter from, but he's been very generous historically. But there's no doubt that 777 have been putting money into Everton in recent months. And it looks as if they put in a further £40 million, taking the total, and this is an unsecured loan by the looks of it, to £150 million. They clearly want to get approval. There are stories doing the rounds that they've been given approval by the Financial Conduct Authority, which is a sort of government regulator. But there's still no white smoke coming out of Premier League towers with regards to, I think, the key issues as far as 777 are concerned is, A, where have you got that money from? And B, how do you propose to fund the club over the course of the next 2 years? And that should be relatively straightforward, you know, if you've got good sources of funds. So that has been dragging on. Now, 777 have been telling people publicly that they expect to have approval from the Premier League over the course of the next week, which is fantastic. Privately, if the reports in Josimar, and Josimar is a Norwegian publication, if the publication is correct, then things aren't looking as good. And if the Premier League say no, where does that leave 777? And where does that leave Everton Football Club? There's also talk of another US-based consortium being interested in buying the club. One was apparently put off before Christmas, given the extent of the club's debts. If the reports are correct, the total debts of Everton are in the region of £1 billion. And the new owners, or the new prospective owners' alternative to 777, aren't keen on getting involved with the club under those circumstances. It could be that some of the lenders will have to take a haircut. And by a haircut, that means what a haircut means in financial terms is that if you've lent somebody £1 million, you might have to accept that you're going to get 80% of it back. And when we saw this, I think most famously in respect of Cyprus when the financial crash occurred in 2008. And there were many Russian banks and Russian citizens, because Cyprus has a very cozy relationship with Russia, who had to accept they're going to lose 5% of the money they'd put into Cypriot banks and so on. So that's where we are. Looking at 777, they do specialise in what we would refer to as distressed football clubs, with the view that they've got the skills that can turn them round. But if we take a look at some of the other investments, we've got Hertha in Germany. That has, according to the reports, has got 136 million euros funding gap, which 777 say, we'll plug that one. And then Standard Liège losing a fortune, and Genoa not doing very well financially either. So it doesn't appear to have done particularly well with regards to its continental investments. And then we've got the issue with Everton. And of course, why does Everton need £40 million? Well, it needs it to pay the wages, and it needs it to fund the construction of the stadium. So it's very messy, and further cause for concern, even though results on the pitch have certainly been better overall since the 10-point deduction, ironically, and Everton have picked up a bit. So that's where we stand. Not a great position to be in, but it's not a disaster either.
What's worrying me, Kieran, is that I've asked you these two questions twice before. And the first question is, why is it taking so long for the Premier League to approve the takeover? And the second question is this additional money? And I think this is the third time they've put in additional money. Is this a way of 777 saying to the Premier League, if you don't approve this, Everton are going to owe us a lot of money, and that's going to put them into administration?
Well, let's take those questions in turn. Why so long is simply because 777 haven't managed to convince the Premier League, who are doing a very thorough and very forensic investigation into the state of the finances, that they can tick those boxes. There are two tests to satisfy: owners and directors test. A, do you have any outstanding convictions? And we've all had a bit of a jolly, historically, with a few japes with regards to things which should go back 20 years. So let's just knock those on the head. Secondly, can you prove where the money's come from and prove that you've got the money going forwards? And I think that is proving to be a sticking point. What the Premier League doesn't want to do is to say, yes, let's go ahead with this deal, and then in 3 months' time for things to go wrong, because that will mean that the likelihood of the Premier League's attempt to dilute and to oppose the independent regulator would look very weak. So it can't be seen to approve things and things go wrong. It would like, if possible, to delay this as long as possible, to bring it into the in tray of the regulator, because then there's a get-out-of-jail-free card. Is there a danger of 777 putting some form of financial blackmail into the hands of the Premier League? Yeah, those are inflammatory words that I've just said. But certainly from speaking to Everton fans that I know, it's a concern of them, because these are unsecured loans. It does, of course, mean that if it's an unsecured loan, there is a queue of people that are owed money by Everton Football Club, and 777 are by far from the front of that queue. It wouldn't be in 777's interests to have the club put into administration, because, as we saw with the last club that went into administration, which was Derby County, unsecured creditors only got 25% of what was owed to them. So for 777 to lose 75% of what's owed to them would be pretty catastrophic for them. And I think it will be a down tools as far as the stadium is concerned, and the stadium is a way for Everton to generate more money going forward. So I think it's now looking at 2025, 26 from when it's hoping to open.
Just one last thing, Kieran, on the Premier League's forensic examination of 777's finances, and it's not an expression I like, but this is not an attempt to blow smoke up your bottom, although I believe one of the clubs that you once ran when it was going into administration was that was a service that was available, I understand. But I went to see Bobby Numbers yesterday, my accountant. It was surprisingly relaxed affair because I've paid so much tax and instalments recently. We're almost up to date, but and as is quite often the case, his next client was delayed for half an hour because we were talking about football, and the subject of 777 came up. Bobby's a big football fan. Bobby said, essentially, the Premier League could get on the phone to you, and within 20 minutes, you could give the Premier League a fair idea of the state of 777's finances. So you do wonder, and Bobby's an accountant as well, so he knows these things. You do wonder why, to what forensic level the Premier League are going, that it is taking this long, Kieran, because it's now months. This is like Man United. This was a takeover that was meant to be done and dusted within 2 weeks, and it's now taking that, and you can't help but, as every day goes by, you can't help but think either they're delaying this forensic examination, or it's going so deep. And if it's going so deep, you wonder what they found to keep this delay going.
Yeah, I mean, it would take anybody a considerable amount of time, I suspect. And also, the Premier League are very wary, having seen what happened with Derby County and Chris Kirchner. Chris Kirchner did provide evidence to the EFL. I appreciate it's a different governing body. Did provide evidence to the EFL that he had proof of funds. He also provided that to some pretty big hitting banks as well. And it turned out that anybody with a glorified form of Photoshop can make things look a lot better than they are. So I think the Premier League is right to be wary, and it is actually, I will criticise the Premier League at times for a lack of transparency in relation to certain issues. But on this one, I think it is acting in the best interests of the club and in the best interests of Everton football fans. So the degree of forensic is simply a case of saying to 777, we need somebody to sign off on this. And that's either going to be a senior firm of auditors who should be able to access. We want access to your in real time to your bank transactions to see where money is being transferred from and so on. And 777 are either not providing sufficient evidence with regards to that or refusing. So it's not a great position for them to be in. And it's frustrating because, as we've spoken on many occasions with regard to Manchester United, time is, the Glazers and Jim Ratcliffe is a separate issue. It's getting rid of hopeless owners and hopefully replacing them with better owners. In the case of Everton, it's a need must. The club is in financial challenging position.
Our next story, Kieran, it takes us to Stoke City, and given how wealthy their owners are, this story is a little bit of a surprise.
Yes, Bet365 published their accounts a couple of days ago, and in between the intriguing stuff along the lines of Denise Coates is the highest paid executive year in, year out, and what she has done in terms of progressing Bet365 has been pretty amazing. She's earning more than £200 million a year and picking up the thick end of the rest of £100 million a year in dividends and so on. And also Bet365 give £100 million a year to charity, which is great, both on a local level, on a UK level and an international level. So it does do that. Stoke City are still losing a lot of money. So it was only around about 12 million quid. And I say, and we throw these numbers about because I think we have become inoculated. That's a hell of a lot of money for an organisation which only generates 20 million a year. But the great thing from Stoke's point of view is that we've just had to use the A word, the administration word. Is it a possible issue with Everton? I think it's possible, but remote. My personal view. Bet365's close relationship with Stoke City means that there's a negligible chance. So Stoke are losing £12 million in a year. To put that into context, I went into Bet365's accounts in a bit of detail. There's certain things which they don't show, but which I can back out from historic information. Bet365 generate £129,000 a minute in bets.
Wow.
Yeah. So in order for them to cover Stoke City's losses, we are talking, it's sorted very, very quickly. It's a very successful organisation, and people say, "Is that coming all from the UK?" It's not. It now does have overseas punters as well, and it is spectacularly successful. But £129,000 a minute in wagers being placed, and that's why you see the adverts and the marketing campaigns practically non-stop, because it's got a 365-day a year, 24-hour a day operation, and that really contrasts with the football club, in the sense of, as we know, football. We say this time in, time out. Football clubs generate money 25 days a year, and Stoke are out of the cups now, so their focus is going to be on the championship, and they've, since being relegated, they've not really got close. I think they've disappointed the regular fans in terms of their league positions.
In the absence of a Palace game on Saturday, I switched my allegiances to Stoke. You won't be surprised to learn. And for 30 glorious minutes, I was a very happy boy. This is an unlikely scenario, Kieran, because Stoke City are not exactly ailing. I mean, these results are not brilliant, but should they reach a stage where the football club was in danger of administration, there's nothing technically. There's no FFP rules, or there's no EFL regulations to prevent Bet365 bailing them out, is there? There's no reason why Bet365 couldn't give them a 15-20 million pound loan or gift or donation, or is there?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, Bet365 have lent Stoke City, tens and tens of millions, in fact, hundreds of millions, and also they were persuaded to pay an awful lot of money for the stadium a week before the EFL changed the rules, which allowed clubs to sell stadiums to owners and book those profits for FFP purposes, which I'm sure was just an amazing coincidence.
Of course.
And whoever negotiated on behalf of Stoke did a really good job. They managed to extract a really good price from the buyer of the Bet365 stadium, Bet365 Group Limited.
It was an amazing coincidence, Kieran, but I think even Charles Dickens, who loved a coincidence, most of Charles Dickens' plot lines are based on coincidence, I think even he might have gone, I'm not entirely sure the public will buy this one as a coincidence, but never mind, let's go with it. Chapter 11, they buy the ground. This next story, Kieran, is good news, it seems, so I don't know what it's doing here, but it's about Walsall, so it's here, so we need to discuss it.
Yes. Well, Walsall is not a club that we talk about often, which is good news. But they've broken even. They've been in League Two, but there is some good news surrounding the club. New owners have come in, and the Bescott Stadium, which I have been to on quite quite many an occasion, and seen some great. I do have some great memories of Walsall as well. Their former owner, a guy called, I think it was Jeff Bonser or Jeff Bosner. I'm mixing him up now with Bonza Airways, and I was contacted by Bonza Airways the other day, which is a completely separate issue.
Really? Have they found your luggage?
Yes. Probably not, judging from the TripAdvisor reports I've seen of Bonza Airways. But the former owner, Jeff Bosner, he had managed to transfer the stadium to his pension fund and was then charging the football club a lot of rent, which his pension fund is entitled to do. A cynic, and this isn't a cynical show. Okay, this is not a cynical. A cynic would say, that's seems to be an awful lot of rent for a relatively small stadium. But we now have new owners who've come in. They have acquired the freehold of the stadium. And what is most noticeable is that Walsall Football Club generates most of its income from commercial means. The money that comes from ticket sales is only a small fraction. And it has been pointed out to me on social media, if anybody that's driven down the M6 motorway, and the chances are that they're not driving very fast as they go past Walsall, because it is a bit of a traffic jam area. There's this enormous set of advertising hoardings outside the stadium, which are right in your eye line, and the fact that these people are saying, we are convinced that this is the biggest single earner for Walsall Football Club, and it probably not the case, but fair play to the club. It's the marketing department, the advertising department have monetised the club, and they're monetising the club 365 days a year, which is something to be applauded.
It's like when Brentford at the old ground had KLM painted on top of the stand, right over the flight path. I don't know. There must be some kind of ratio for the amount of times you've passed a ground compared to the amount of times you've been in it. Because Walsall is one of the few grounds I've not ever been to, but I must have driven past it. Well, not me, of course. I can't drive, but some lucky person would have been having the benefit of my company while we were stuck in a traffic jam. We're not a cynical show, Kieran, but I am wondering why Bonza Airlines have been in touch with you rather than me. I think they've probably listened to the show and thought, well, one of these people is far more likely to be able to afford an economy ticket to Melbourne than the other. So let's offer him a cheaper price. This episode of The Price of Football is brought to you by Football 360 Pro Series, an online course in football business and finance which features our very own Kieran Maguire. If you want to develop serious knowledge within football business and finance, grow your network in the football industry, or you just need more than your usual 2 hours of Kieran every week, Football 360 Pro Series might be the solution for you this new year. The 8-week course, which starts next week on January the 17th, will feature a small class size, a combination of on-demand lessons, and weekly industry expert-led workshops.
The lineup of industry experts consists of former Premier League chief executives, football agents, the General Secretary of the newly formed Union of European Clubs, financial analysts with experience at clubs such as Aston Villa, Leicester, Fulham, Manchester City, Millwall, and Barcelona. You don't get those mentioned together too often, do you? And me! You'll learn everything from club financial statements to accounting for player transactions, navigating spending restrictions, and conducting your own financial analysis. The word amortization might also appear.
Oh, and what's even better is that there is a special discount for our Price of Football listeners. Use the code POF EarlyBird, all in capital letters. That's POF EarlyBird, all in capital letters, to get 25% off the course fees. For more information, just go to football360.online and select Pro Series. Another club, Kieran, I don't think we've ever mentioned before, to be honest, is Taunton Town. But unfortunately, such is the nature of this pod, that the first time we mention the club, it tends to be in the context of bad news, and it seems to be this is the case here.
Yes, Taunton Town are in the National League South. They are nicknamed the Peacocks, which instantly means that we like them because we both like a bird-related nickname for a club. And between Christmas and New Year, I think it was, or early in the New Year, the players posted on social media that promises had been broken, that there were issues with regards to their relationship with the owners of the club, the board of the club. 7 players have departed. So clearly there are issues. Now, the board of directors have responded to say, yeah, we've got cash flow issues. The manager is saying, I've got a pretty weak budget by the standards of the National League South. And the majority of clubs in National League South are part-time. There's far more full-time clubs in National League North. But there is a rift. So, is the existence of the club to be called into question? I don't think we're at that stage yet. But equally, I think they are in quite a challenging position. And, we've always said, it doesn't matter which division you're in, ultimately, we're all bricks in the same wall. And without sounding too cliched, if you take one brick out, it weakens the wall as a whole. Now, I'm sure the hedge funds and the private equity organisations that are looking to invest in Premier League clubs and clubs in continental Europe aren't in the least bothered about Taunton Town. But for their fans, they are. Yeah, it is that focal point. So, it's now a club that's on my watch list, and I'm getting daily updates from the Somerset Gazette about how things are developing. So it's a case of keeping your fingers crossed.
Indeed. We never quite got to the bottom of why so many non-league northern teams are full-time compared to non-league southern teams. Does it complicate things? And I'm aware this might be a question you need to ask an employment lawyer, Kieran, but does it complicate things when players are part-time in this sort of situation? Because hopefully they will have other jobs potentially that they could go to, so they'll be less bothered by their football club not paying them. Having said that we're short of time at the start, maybe this is something we should investigate for another day. But let's put that question out there, Kieran, and see if perhaps, if only we knew somebody who was a director of another team in National League South who might be able to help us.
Well, perhaps if the secret National League South director could get in contact with us, and I'm sure he will, we'll be able to answer this on the next show.
Well, he's not that much of a secret, Kieran, is he? Considering he retweets most of the stuff that we do. But if he could get in touch, or I'll see him in the pub before the next Palace game, hopefully. Yes. A number of teams, Kieran, of various sizes have issued new shares in the last few days.
Yes, and the reason for this is, and it's very much a case of scale. In January, just like things on a personal level, I'm an employee of an institution which pays me a week early in December, and I think many people do that, which is great. It's great until January arrives, and then you've got problems. So what we've seen is Chelsea have been given £140 million from shareholders. I think we have to assume that that this is from Clear Lake Capital and Todd Bowley and his cronies and so on. And it's a huge sum of money. Now, the reaction of Chelsea fans on social media when somebody put this out on Twitter, was that's great. We know that Mbappe could potentially sign a pre-contract in January, and the club's been linked with other purchases. I don't want to pour liquid on their chips, but I'm not convinced that would be the case. And the reason for this is I think many football fans fall into the trap of when they see money coming into the club, they assume that it can instantly be paid, and they ignore the fact that the club already has significant debts. If we go back 12 months in respect of Chelsea, they signed Enzo Fernandez, which at the time was for a record fee. They signed Mudryk from Shakhtar Donetsk. My knowledge of transfers isn't great, for about another £80 million, and they made a couple of other transfers. And one thing that we have learned is that transfers are very much being paid in instalments these days, and those instalments tend to be on the anniversary of when the player was signed. So Chelsea are going to have to find tens and tens of millions of pounds in January. We've also said on regular occasions that clubs don't actually make a lot of money from ticket sales sort of during the regular season. And part of the reason for that is that they've got the majority of the money coming from season ticket holders who pay the money up front. And then if you think about what's happening in January, we've got the winter break. So clubs do have a bit of a gap between matches, which is good for players in terms of their physical development. The accountants, the finance directors aren't happy about it because it puts another week between when money is coming into the club. So that is the issue at Chelsea. Yes, it's good that the money's come in. Don't build up your hopes that money's going to be spent. We've also seen at Bournemouth a substantial amount of money, but we're talking, I think it's 10 or 11 million pounds gone into the club. I suspect that is for infrastructure projects. The new owners, I think it's Bill Foley is his name. He's from Texas. I've been to Bournemouth Stadium, and it's perfect, meets the needs, but it is too small. Bournemouth could easily have double the size of the stadium and sell every ticket as a Premier League club. It's only got a capacity of 11,000. So is this going to be used as sort of a down payment for a new ground? Is it going to be used for development of the existing ground? We'll have to wait to see. And thirdly, Kilmarnock, which they've got £400,000, and they've got owners who are trying to Kilmarnock. I think they're currently about fourth or fifth in the Scottish Premiership. They want to play in Europe next season. So it's money which is coming in from owners, and the good news, it's not in the form of loans. Going back to our first story, 777, they can't put money into the club in the form of shares because that would be in breach of the owners and directors test. So therefore, they're putting it in the form of loans. Here, at least, we've got existing owners who are being pretty generous to the clubs.
It's a real double-edged sword, that getting paid 10 days before Christmas, isn't it? Because the money comes in and you think, right, Ali, upgrade that turkey. We're going straight for a Norfolk bronze. And then Ali says, but there's 6 weeks between Christmas and the next payday, Forget that 6 weeks. Just get more candles. Get a 6-foot Christmas tree, more candles. The January can look after itself. And then suddenly you find yourself in January, again, I really regret that bigger tree now. And yes, that Norfolk bronze.
I thought you were going to say 4 candles there, and we'd have to go into a completely different dimension.
I love a candle. I always have a candle display at Christmas, but I make sure there are 5 candles because there's only so many times people can come around the house and you can see them counting the candles. You go, oh God, I wish I put 5 candles out. Also, interesting thing about that sketch is that the opening line is the funniest bit of it. 4 candles, cracking joke. The rest of it, none of it makes any sense whatsoever. This next story is an intriguing one, Kieran, I find, because it's not an option for us at Selhurst Park. But there are an increasing number of football clubs across Europe who are trying to raise money by turning their ground into tourist attractions, Kieran.
Yes, there are. And it's proving to be very lucrative. If you take a look at what's happening in Spain, the pictures in respect of the new Real Madrid stadium are absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Barcelona have similar aims, and I think you've got to give a lot of credit to this to Spurs. They have shown what can be done. You know, I've been to the Pawson's Arms with you, and I've always made incredibly welcome. And I absolutely understand why you go there and you leave at just the right moment in time, so that you spend the minimum amount of time in Selhurst Park itself. Now, I've got many friends who are Manchester United fans who are regulars, who take exactly the same approach. They will go to the same pub because they can get a decent pint. The toilets work. There's not a leak in the roof at the pub, and that area of Manchester is not a wealthy area, but at least they look after their patrons appropriately. And therefore, they get to Old Trafford and they're in and out. Now, if you take a look at what's happened at Spurs, they've got wide concourses. The amount of money which they're generating from beer sales, I think, has gone up by a factor of 8, even though the capacity of the ground has less than doubled. They're making £800,000 a match from catering alone. And they are also monetising the stadium on non-match days through stadium tours, through you can do the walk over the ground itself, and for want of a better phrase, this is the Disneyfication of football. And people, and here I'm genuinely not being cynical. It's great because the more money that clubs can generate means that the less pressure they're under to increase ticket prices for us. And so on. It allows them to be more competitive as far as the transfer market, and also, we've praised those clubs that have committed to the real living wage. Well, that's because they got more money coming in. So fair play to them. But this is becoming a big issue, and I'm going to try to approach one of the designers of the stadiums. I think we might have one or two contacts indirectly to say, come on the show and just to show us all this magnificent work that you've done in making football stadiums have a wow factor. So this I'd picked up, I think, from an article in one of the newspapers, but it is staggering what football grounds can become. And whilst it's not our problem, I think this is the biggest issue in Sir Jim Ratcliffe's in tray. Should he take control of Manchester United as a club, because Old Trafford's not fit for purpose as a 21st century stadium, and this is one of the biggest clubs in the world.
I should point out, Kieran, technically at the Pawson's Arms there is a giant leak in the roof because we always sit outside, whatever the weather. It rather baffles Bev and Graham, who run the place, but we always sit outside. I would love to, much as I love being in the pub, if there were more things going on at Selhurst Park and Selhurst Park was fit for purpose, I would happily go there. 45. I'd happily spend an hour in the pub and 45 minutes at Selhurst Park. But there's nothing to do apart from stand shoulder to shoulder and anxiously wait for a beer before kick-off. So you don't bother. And I think it was a Man City Huddersfield FA Cup game when our friend Pat Nevin, it takes a lot to cheer Pat Nevin up, but he was delighted because at Man City he said there was all sorts of things going on. At half-time they had this thing in the look-alike competition where the cameras were scouring the crowd to find Man City fans who look like managers or CV stars, and it's all very funny and very easy to get a drink and very easy to get a coffee. So if that were the case at more grounds, then you would happily go there. But then the downside to that is that the local economy suffers, because if we're all in the ground drinking, we're not in the pubs and cafes.
I think if you're attracting more people on non-match days, then the local economy can benefit as well.
Yeah, fair point. Very fair point. Our penultimate story, Kieran, is about Manchester City, and I'm bemused. I know it's my default situation on this pod, Kieran, but I'm actually slightly bemused by this story of injunctions and Manchester City.
Yeah, this is a bizarre one. I think Manchester City now have an official beer partner, and I think it's a Japanese beer called Ashoka Superdry Beer,
Ooh.
and that to me means it's a beer called Ashoka, which is now I don't know anything about alcohol, as we both know very well. Beer to me looks wet rather than dry, but I don't understand. People talk to me about dry wine and sweet wine, and it goes over my head, and they explain it to me just like I explain amortization to you, and I'm equally none the wiser as you are none the wiser on amortization. So it's one of the okay. It just doesn't make sense. But there is a clothing company called Superdry who's saying, well, people might get confused, and I'm going, well, how on earth? People know Superdry. If anything, you'd think that they would benefit. So it could be that they're going to try to get some form of injunction to say that Manchester City's Superdry partner has nothing to do with Superdry, even though I would think it would take an Aegis to believe otherwise. But when there are opportunities for our silver-tongued friends to send off an injunction, they will quite happily do so. So yeah, it's a crazy one, an absolutely crazy one.
Just as I say to people that between us, you and I have 130,000 followers on Twitter. Between us, you and I know enough about alcohol. So essentially, you're doing all the heavy lifting.
And amortization.
Exactly, yeah. You're doing all the heavy lifting when it comes to Twitter followers, and I'm happy to do the heavy lifting when it comes to the alcohol. The final story, Kieran, is a brief one. It's a brief good news story. And I'm pleased to say that it's my club doing something right for once.
Yes, it is. And hat doffed to the powers that be at Palace. I think it's fair to say your match at home to Everton wasn't a page turner. If it was a book,
oh my God! If it was a book, that would have been an Oxfam after 5 minutes. If that was a book, that was an Oxfam. Oxfam wouldn't have wanted it. Oxfam would have put it on there with all the Dan Brown books that we don't want either. That was a dreadful game.
So there is a replay, and the cynic in me wondered whether the Premier League had said to both clubs, put on an absolute shit show, boys, because we're trying to persuade people to abolish third round replays.
Indeed, yeah.
But I'm not a cynic.
Yeah.
So there is a replay. It's going to take place at Goodison. It's going to be midweek, and I think those Palace fans who are contemplate going up again, let's set rivalries aside. Fair play to you for doing that. But the club has, by all accounts, said, "Look, we're going to put on free transport as an acknowledgement of your commitment to Palace." And well done. Yeah, this is coming from Brighton fan. Well done, the decision makers at Palace in respect of that, as I say.
Yeah, they're providing free coach travel for fans who are travelling up, and they will travel up in their numbers as always. It just made me laugh that, again, it's met with the response from some Palace fans going, oh, this is a lovely, kind, generous gesture. More Palace fans going, I'd rather you spent the money on players. That 400 quid you're spending on coaches, I'd rather you spent that on, put that towards Eddie Nketiah. Because, clubs can't do right for doing wrong, can they? They try and make a generous gesture. No. And there will still be somebody, probably in the Paulson's arms, going, I'm not having this, doing something nice. Let's turn this into a negative. So that's what we love about football fans. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, it'd be very kind of you, and it'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, on our regular Monday questions pod, you can do that by emailing us at questions@priceoffootball.com, and going to priceoffootball.com will get you the opportunity to buy one of our books or get yourself a Price of Football, a T-shirt. So again, as I say, we'll be back on Monday. Questions. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, it's going to be a slightly different customary farewell. We are very fortunate to have our list of secret chums who As the show has progressed, we built up relationships with people from a variety of backgrounds, and this goes out to one of our secret silver-tongued friends. On the 3rd of January, his wife was admitted to hospital. They've been expecting their first kids, and things were not great. So there were two young girls were born at 10 o'clock by C-section, and one of them weighs 650 grams at birth. Wow. Now, just think about that. Wow. 650, that's a pound and a half. The other girl was 725. They're in intensive care. They're fighting. They're being given the best care in the world. But I just want to shout out to our secret lawyer. Lots of love from myself and Kevin and everybody at the show. And we thank you for all that you've done for us, and we just hope everything progresses on behalf of you.
Yeah, of course. I didn't know that was coming up, Kieran, but we'll send our thoughts and prayers, of course, we will, and we'll send our thanks and prayers to all those people who are battling to save those little babies' lives. So that's, Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.